But yeah, my beats, they are hard.
To the BCSN Sports Wrap. Brian Fulford and A.D. Drew here, and we're continually having football draft conversations, as we like to call them, part of our BCSN conversation series. And we're going to get into talking about the draft from a scout's perspective and the website Draft Diamonds. And we're going to talk to Damond Talbot here. And we're going to talk to him and just get some perspective on just small schools, HBCU players, and some of the guys who are hoping to continue their career in the NFL. And so joining us right now from Draft Diamonds, Damond Talbot. Damond, Bryan and A.D. Drew here. How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you doing?
All right. Doing well. First off, and as I said when I sent you the email, I've been a follower of your site probably, for me, I gotta say probably maybe 3 or 4 years. Just from a small school perspective, paying attention to your coverage throughout the year. But give us and share with us a little bit about how long you've been covering small school athletes and just football in general from this unique perspective.
Yeah, I started off, this has been my passion. I'm a law enforcement officer full time, but this has become my passion. And it's something that I fell in love with years ago. About 8 years ago, I came full bore on using NFL Draft Diamonds and turning that into a business. But before that, I did a lot of scouting just on my own. I was given an opportunity from Eric Galko, who ran Optimum Scouting, and he gave me an opportunity to scout HBCU football players. And it started all there. It started with me just watching HBCU football, and it grew into something that I realized that HBCU football players were not getting the attention and love that they truly deserve. And it became a passion of mine, and I cranked out NFL Draft Diamonds specifically for HBCU football players. And I realized after a couple of years of doing it that there's a lot of small schools that really don't get attention. So it ended up turning into this monster project, and now I'm covering every Division II, Division III, NAIA, and HBCU college. And obviously D1 AA as well, which is the FCS. I try to stay away from the Division I FBS colleges, but I do like do interviews with prospects and different things like that. But overall, I try to give the underdog an opportunity to tell their story and to give them a platform.
And so when you started this, you said about 8 years or so ago, and actually I do, I think what I remember about when I was trying to remember when I first came across your site, NFLDraftDiamonds.com. A young man that actually I coached in high school went on to UT Chattanooga and was a tight end. And he's a freakish athlete, about 6'5". Matter of fact, he's one of the guys that's on Big Brother, Faisal Shafat.
Yeah.
He's on, and so that was my guy in high school, right? And so that's how I discovered your site, because I think you did an interview or you covered him. And I always felt he should have been a guy that got drafted. But anyway, you mentioned getting your starts in covering HBCU guys. Who were some of the guys that you recall from when you first got started that got an opportunity getting drafted, or maybe guys who didn't, that you kind of look back on and say, why didn't this guy get a shot?
There's so many guys that don't get shot, unfortunately, don't get shots from colleges. But a couple guys that I can go back and that are just fond early starting memories were like guys like Marquette King, from Fort Valley. He was a kid that we showed up at an HBCU All-Star game in Atlanta, Georgia, with Tabor Small, and here this guy is. All the scouts are looking one way, and then all of a sudden you hear this boom, rocket ships in the air. Everyone turned around and looked, and this kid was kicking 5-second punts, and they weren't even coming down. It was crazy. They were going 70, 80 yards, and he was a kid that we discovered and we invited to that All-Star event, and he went on to have a little NFL career, Pro Bowler. We had other guys that were there that event too. Adrian Hamilton, who came out of Prairie View A&M, that ended up going on to win a Super Bowl with the Ravens that nobody was talking about, but he broke. He Buck Buchanan guy. He was breaking all these sacks. He didn't win the award, but he was up there. And then you had it was just Ryan Davis from Bethune-Cookman, who's a Tampa kid that, he could jump out the gym. This kid was a basketball player and then converted over to D-end, and he had a little stint in the NFL for a while. And, there's so many great players that come out of these small schools that are overlooked. And it's great when you go back and look back, and some of the guys that we helped, like Jamal Johnson Webb, who helped my kid with homework. He was an Alabama A&M offensive lineman, and just had a lot of great memories from the HBCU, and just not even just the HBCU, just a lot of guys. And I agree with you. Faisal Shafat should have been drafted. He was overlooked, and I think his coaches didn't help him out a little bit. But not saying high school coaches, I'm saying his college coaches didn't help him as much. But there's a lot of great players, and there are people that get overlooked, and there's people that also get the bad name for their past, and they can't get over that.
All right, Damon. You've been doing this for a few years, and obviously you've seen different level of players from NAIA to Division II to FCS players. If you could kind of talk about the difference in the talent level between these players that you've been seeing who should have a shot, and talk about two different perspectives. As you go from the smaller schools, NAIA schools, up to your FCS schools, just those difference in talent levels. And then what you see is the big difference between those and some of the FBS players who are household names that we see on TV every Saturday.
To be honest with you, that's a great question. I think when you start looking at NAIA, Division II, Division III even, these guys jump off the film. When you turn on the film and you're sitting there watching it, it's kind of hard to watch some NAIA football. I'm just going to be honest. Some of these kids are super talented. They're huge. Some of these kids are like rejects from college programs. Maybe they've gotten in trouble, or maybe they just didn't have the size or the grades, but they had the talent. And I'm not saying every single one of them have talent. A lot of them have talent. So when you're watching film on like Division II, Division II, I got to take that back. Division III and NAIA, you can really see who stands out. You can see that some guys they just look like they don't belong. When you turn on the film, you see a defensive end that's 6'4", 6'5", and he's getting around his guy every time. He might not get a sack every time, but he's getting around the edge every time. Or you got an offensive lineman just punishing people into the ground, left and right. The thing is, the difference between the NAIA, Division III, in all of them is level of competition, and that's the most hated word when you talk to a scout or an NFL team and they say, oh, well, it's a level of competition thing. That's the worst thing that you can hear, especially from a scout perspective, because I don't care what level of competition you are. If you dominate, then you're good. And that shows that individual is good at what he does. Now, is he as good as somebody in the FBS, or is he good as somebody in Division II or in Division III? That's where you have to range the level of competition. When you take a kid like Jeremiah Farms this year from the NAIA, from Friends, he's dominating everybody. He's getting all these sacks. But if we put him in Division III, is he still going to get sacks? Yes, he is. I think he does. You put him in Division II, is he going to get all the sacks? I'm not sure. I'm sure he'll be all right, but I don't know if he'll be able to break that D2, D1 barrier. But then you can take a kid from like the NAIA, like Josh Brown from College of Idaho, from a small school, who's 6'7", 320 pounds, and he's punishing people at the NAIA level at offensive tackle. I think when you move him up to D3, he'll still punish people. D2, he's still going to punish people. D1, AA, he's still going to punish people because he's huge. And he had it. And I think that's where the level of competition goes from where the player is to where they'll be. Now, when you look at Division II schools, the same way. They're going to jump off the film. And then FCS guys, some of these guys are FBS players that have been knocked down that still have the talent. Maybe they just have something in their background. A lot of these guys leave school because they end up getting to an FBS school, and they'll get there and they realize that they're not the star anymore. And we've made that's our problem as a society. We take a kid, and when they're good, we tell them they're great, and then they want to be the best. So they want to go to the SEC or they want to go to the ACC, and they find out that, hey, look, man, I'm good at my local level, but I'm not an SEC talent. And then they find out that they're sitting the bench, but in their mind they still believe they're an SEC talent. So they end up coming down. And if they come down to a level that fits them right, they'll explode and they'll get an opportunity in the NFL. If they continue to have that mindset of their SEC players, they might never get their opportunity. So FBS, FCS, the biggest difference is somebody was given them someone was given an opportunity, because 90% of the players in the FCS can compete. And when you can see that on Saturdays when they play, when an FCS team takes on an FBS team, two things either happen. Either it's a blowout and one team blows somebody out and they just got a paycheck for showing up, or they compete and they come out there and they punch somebody in the mouth. And you've seen FCS teams dominate and beat teams that are in the FBS, and it's happened, and it happens every year, and it's going to continue happening because there's some programs that take that as a competition, and some people don't. Some teams take it as a paycheck, and but the difference is not. It's very minor between the two.
I've always said that probably the starters on the FBS team and the FCS team are probably pretty similar, equal in talent. Where the FBS teams usually get us is their number twos and their number threes are as good as their number ones, where tends to be a drop off in the FCS and Division II between the number ones and the number twos, and definitely from the number twos to the number threes. So I definitely understand that. All right, Bryan.
Let me add something. You were mentioning about scouts, and when you hear the dreaded level of competition thing, is when you hear that from a scout, and I know a lot of scouts keep their job based on being able to find diamonds in the rough. When you hear that from a scout, do you sort of think, okay, this guy is just being lazy, he's not really doing his due diligence, or is it something else that when you hear guys say that?
Well, number one, if you look at level of competition, that's always something that's there. Okay, that's not. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, you're playing at a Division III level. It's obvious that he doesn't compare with a kid in the FBS. He hasn't been trained properly. His weight room's probably like your local gym. His food, nutrition-wise, he doesn't have staff to help him with that. So he hasn't gained any weight or added any pounds. So these are all factors which turn a player into a raw player, or a player that's maybe not been trained properly to get to the level that these other kids at Alabama have had for the past 4 years. So when you look at level of competition, and you say that, and that's the only knock that you have on a kid, you are lazy. And I'll tell any scout to their face that they're lazy. I'll tell a GM that they're lazy. If you cannot find knocks in his game, and the only knock that you can find on him is level of competition, you're piss poor at your job.
Wow. Wow. Now, when you're out, go ahead.
Let me ask one other question, AD. Within just the structure of FCS, okay, where I think you have HBCUs, going back to level of competition here, and you have conferences like the MEAC and the SWAC in the FCS level versus, say, conferences, I can't think of the conference, let's say like the SoCo or
maybe the MAC.
What's that?
The MAC.
Yeah, the conferences. let's say I don't know what conference you got James Madison coming from, or
SoCon
even
and all them, and NEAC
SoCon,
and all them. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the disparity between those, I mean, is it really that significant? And I'm not going to ask you about polls and things like that because I know that's voter perception. But I think sometimes that factors in when it gets down to drafting and scouting and finding guys. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think too, the facilities a lot of times help too when it comes to recruiting. Not knocking the HBCU. HBCU schools are phenomenal, and their history is what makes that school so powerful. And if the people knew, if the young kids knew what really had to go on to get that school established, I think they would have a different perspective for it. You know, I live close to Bethune-Cookman here, and what Mary McLeod did for Bethune-Cookman is insane. I mean, that should be a documentary that we're teaching our kids. Now, I think that the history behind that, and that they had to run and hide to back in the slave days to have school, and then you have a black athlete that they'd rather go to an Alabama over their own culture is mind-blowing to me, number one. But who am I? I mean, this is just my opinion. I think that deep down inside in the MEAC and the SWAC, they're trying to do things to compete, but they're holding their kids back. All right. The reason why the MEAC and the SWAC and the SEAC and the CIA, the reason that they're stuck and they're not growing is they want to keep everything. They want to try to hold everything in. They're trying to keep the culture there, which is great. It reminds me of Puerto Rico in the United States. They want to keep the culture in Puerto Rico, and you don't want to change it, but they want to become a state, but they don't want to become a state because they don't want to lose their culture. It's the same thing. And when you're looking at the MEAC and the SWAC and these other conferences, can they compete with these other teams? Yes, they can, but why aren't they? Why are we just limiting them? And I feel like deep down inside, when you look at these schools, when you look at teams like in the SoCon and these different things, they're expanding their wings. They're going out there and facing better. They're getting more recruits. They're improving their stuff. They're doing these things. You go to a HBCU game, and the halftime show is better than the football sometimes.
True.
Because that's where they put their money. They don't invest in the HBCU players anymore like they should, and that bothers me. That was one of my biggest gripes for years and years and years. It's not that they can't find the talent. It's that there's nothing that's eye-opening or appealing to these kids when they're coming out that say, I want to go to the HBCU schools rather than I want to go to the James Madison that's on ESPN. Listen, you might get on ESPN when it's the MEAC versus the SWAC and the showdown or the Bethune-FAMU game, but it's very rarely that you're getting on TV. It's very rarely that you're getting the extra publicity. It's not there. And that, I think, that hurts. That hurts the school. That hurts the kids. You know, a lot of HBCU schools don't even hold pro days for their kids. How do you want the kid to benefit if you're not going to go the extra mile for that kid? There's just a lot of things they're lackluster when it comes to that, and it bothers me. And it bothers me because I know what they've went through, because I've seen for years now that the programs, they cut back and they cut back and they cut back. And it's just extremely hard. I hope I answered your question by going into my little rant, but it's true. It's true. And I feel like there's so much. Do you realize that 10% of the National Football League, the NFL's Pro Football Hall of Fame, 10% is made up of HBCU football players? Why is that?
Right.
Why is that?
Right.
Why is Walter Payton coming out of Jackson State? And why is Jerry Rice going out of Mississippi Valley? Why did they come out of them schools? It's real simple. Back then, them big schools didn't want them. Mm-hmm. So they went to their school. And the school that they went to, they became the best at what they did. And that's what happened. And Jackson State could compete. Look at what Steve McNair did. I mean, there's just so many talented players that have come out that it's just not the same anymore.
Yeah. While I did not see Walter Payton and Jerry Rice play, I did see Steve McNair when he came to Bragg Stadium in I think that may have been about 93 or so when I was at FAMU. I don't know if Bryan was there yet or if Bryan even remembers that game, but I do remember seeing him play.
I probably was there, but my memory's not as good as yours, though.
But anyway, before I get off on my tangent, Uh, if I were to make you HBCU commissioner of football for one day, what would be your recommendations? And I know you've thrown a lot of stuff out, but what would be your recommendations for some of the biggest changes that we could do to advance the sport of HBCU football?
I would hold. I think, Geez, thanks for letting me do that. But I think I was going to say I was going to hold people accountable, but I would go to my first thing that I would do is I would put out a statement how I'm committed to making HBCU football a prime time something. It has to be a focal point of what you do in that culture. I mean, listen, I'm Caucasian, okay? Let's just say this, all right? It bothers me. It bothers me that there's not more people involved with HBCU football and HBCU. Just this is the youth of most of these kids. If you listen to their stories, are heartbreaking, man. Single mom, dad's in prison, and I'm not saying that's for every school right now in the country. It's like that. It's bad. But when does the kid become the priority? Is it the kid that becomes a priority, or does it your pockets become the priority? And a lot of these people that are in higher positions are pocketing money. They're doing good, and they won't even hold a pro day for a kid. Your kid has to become the number one. He has to become the person that you're focused on. In what is the culture? You have to build the culture. Just like when you look at football, period. If I was the commissioner of anything, I wouldn't take the job number one. I wouldn't, because I don't think I could get the support that I'd need. But number two, what I would do my first day is I'd put people in place that really want to do the same thing as me, and that have the passion. Because let me tell you something, there's too much talent sitting in HBCUs that are overlooked every year, and they end up never getting an opportunity. And that bothers me. And there's too many kids that get kicked out of bigger schools, or that make decisions based on TV and what their friends say rather than really what's important to them. You know, I would take kids that were former football players, kids like Keith Pugh, who played at Howard, and I would put him on the board. And I would put players that have that HBCU passion the same way I do. The Drayton Florence who played at Tuskegee, and the guys that are hungry, that will do what they can to help. You know, you have football players that have tried to go back and donate lights for their stadiums because some of these football teams don't even have lights.
I graduated from the school that still doesn't have lights, Tuskegee, so I know what you're talking about there.
Yeah, do you know? And yeah, no. You want to know what though? I know a former player, a graduate who tried putting lights on there, who offered to pay for the lights.
Yeah,
and he was told no.
Yeah.
So think about that.
The backstory of that too.
So at the end of the day, I don't know what the backstory is, but at the end of the day, you have an opportunity to change, to help these kids.
Yeah.
But we're not giving them that opportunity. Why? Because they're not what the focal point is. We're making money is the focal point. The kid's not the focal point anymore.
Yeah, that's a powerful statement, and I'm not going to argue with it, because I think there's a little, I think there's definitely some truth in that. I know there are some programs who are probably trying to make the good strides, and I think with the difference of new, I guess I could say, the age of the administrators, and as the age of administrators have changed, I've noticed over the past 15, 20 years since we've been involved and focused and concentrating on working with HBCU athletic programs, that seems to be what was once a major problem 20 years ago. It's not as major, but the residual baggage, is still there, and they're still covering, so I agree with definitely some of those points that you brought up. Damon, let's do this. Let's as we're talking about numbers, I want to move to the subject of quarterbacks. And obviously, it comes to my mind most recently the passing of Tarvaris Jackson, T-Jack, who was out of Alabama State, most recently passed. He was drafted 64th at the end of the second round in the 2006 draft. And I was kind of doing the numbers. Since he was drafted, there have only been, out of 160 quarterbacks, there have only been about 11 FCS quarterbacks, one Division II quarterback drafted, and there have been no HBCU quarterbacks drafted since him. And we're talking 2006. So, I mean, what's that? About 14 years now since a quarterback from an HBCU has been drafted. Some guys have gotten opportunities on free agent contracts. What do you attribute that to? And, you know, I guess we'll start there. What do you attribute that to, and why has it taken 14 years since we've had a HBCU quarterback drafted in the first 7 rounds?
Well, I think the quarterback position as a whole there's not many guys that are getting drafted, you know, at the quarterback position. I mean, it's hard when you go back and you look at it. You have to be a top 20 quarterback or a top 15, top 20 quarterback to even get a draft, to hear your name called, because they don't draft like they used to, you know. It feels like more quarterbacks were drafted back in the day, but I think now with the ability to be able to watch more and to see more, a lot of these scouts, they're not going into Alabama State or they're not going into Grambling unless it's a big game. You think about it. If you had an opportunity to go watch Grambling State play against Southern, or you had an opportunity to watch LSU play against Alabama in the same week, where are you going if you're a scout? Plain and simple. Exactly. I don't even have to say nothing. Your silence says it, because you know what I'm saying? You're going to LSU and Alabama. At the end of the day, that's what happens. A lot of these games, a lot of these big-time games, they might have 2 or 3 scouts at them. And people aren't looking at the HBCUs the way that they used to. Because there hasn't been a superior athlete player come out. You know, I mean, you look at T-Jack. T-Jack was a stud. T-Jack came from Arkansas, went to Alabama State, was a beast. I mean, a beast. I mean, he could do everything. He could run. He was fast. He could throw. He could make every throw. It's crazy. It's sad that he passed. I mean, it's horrible. But you go back to it, there hasn't been a quarterback as good as T-Jack, and I'm not even being close. I mean, you've had guys like Devontae Kincaid, who was a D1 transfer down. His height killed him. If he was 6'3", he would have been in the league. But being that he's 6 foot, you know, he could barely get over that hump. NFL's they're very basic. Okay, they look at height, weight, standards. They look at that stuff. Plus, they look at your off the field stuff. If you have more than 2 of those things that aren't checking out, you become a reject in the scouting world, because I have to sell you to my boss. I can't sell you to my boss if 3 of the 3 boxes, 2 of them you fail. You can be a hell of an athlete, but then one of the boxes is you don't fit the standard. You're small. There's only 2 quarterbacks in the league that are 6 foot or less, and then I'm trying to sell them a 6 foot quarterback. And then you have, you know, I mean, I'm just using examples. And then I have to also sell them that you have a background issue that, you know, whatever it may be, and I'm trying to push it off. I'm trying to do that. That's not easy, you know. So when you look at the quarterbacks from the HBCU level that have been drafted, it's been T-Jack, and then I don't think there has been one. So I think you're absolutely right on that. I look at Amir Hall got an opportunity to go showcase himself in one of these All-Star games, a bigger one. He did pretty good, but they thought he was too skinny.
Wow.
You see, I mean, it's like they didn't think he had enough weight on him. So when you go and you look, it's like it's lazy scouting. They attack what they don't know because they didn't watch. You see what I'm saying? When you look at Amir Hall, could he make every throw? Absolutely. Could he run? Yep. He fits the boxes. He was 6'3". He wasn't, but they said he was too small. You know.
And nobody thought that. nobody thought that maybe with a weight or with a proper meal program or a different meal program other than what he had in college, that we could add weight on this guy and then turn him into what we want him to be. Nobody's outside the box thinking like that, huh?
Very rarely. Very rarely. You want to know where you get the outside the box thinking? The coaches. The coaches, the actual coaches, not the scouts, the coaches will come and see a player and go, if I added 10 pounds to this dude, I could turn him into this. It's the coaches that see that and change that, because they have a different system of looking at a player. They go, man, I'm looking for a quarterback that can do this, 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 and this. Well, hey, look, there's a guy. Dude, all we got to do is feed him. That's an easy – we can feed him. You know, this is an easy thing. A scout's looking at it as, if I bring this guy, the coach isn't going to want to take the time to have to feed him, to get him to where he wants. He wants a guy that's ready. And let me tell you something. A scout's job's hard. I'm not knocking a scout. A scout they go on the road more than half the year. They're away from their family. They get paid peanuts. It's a very rough job. Are you going to stand on the table and pound the table for somebody and then risk losing your job? Because if he's not the right one, you're losing your job. I mean, if you take a quarterback that you think is great and he turns out to be a bum, you're losing your job. That's the way it is. I mean, the Browns fired their entire scouting staff because they liked Carson Wentz.
Wow.
They fired their entire – because they pounded the table for Carson Wentz, so they fired their entire scouting staff. Think about that now. Now that's you know, behind the scenes stuff, but you get to hear it first. That's a fact. They were fired because they like Carson Wentz.
Wow.
So
that was the Johnny Manziel draft, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
You look at you got a whole team, a whole scouting staff. They were pounding the table saying, "Dude, we need to draft Carson Wentz. We need a quarterback." And they were brought in, and they were said, "Look, man, all y'all are gone. You don't have the same vision that we do." Boom, fired. They went Johnny Manziel, and then they, you know. I mean,
so how does the coaching? How does the coach? If a coach, how does that connect happen then between a coach and a scout? Because obviously the coach has his job during the season, but when does a scout take a chance, or when does a coach? I guess it would have to be in the off season. I guess. Look at those diamonds in the roughs.
See, the thing is, that's where you need scouts that are not afraid to take a gamble.
Okay.
Listen, you need a scout that's not afraid to pound the table for somebody. A lot of scouts are getting jobs. They're young. They're young guys because it's hard. You're not going to find a guy who's going to want to be away from his wife and his kids for 7 months of the year unless he don't like them, for minimum pay. And then you expect them to pound the table and go above and beyond. They're going to give you exactly what you give them, which is minor. A lot of these guys, I've watched them work. I'm not knocking them, but they have a lot on their hands. I make a database every year that has 800 players in it, and it's just small schoolers. I couldn't imagine having every school in the region, and if you miss on a guy, like let's say, for example, you remember Javon Hargrave when he came out of South Carolina State. Do you know he was not on the Blesto or the national list? So the Blesto or national scouts, what that is that's two scouting firms that work for NFL teams. They go in, they look at players, they write up players. He was not written up by any team throughout his entire career at South Carolina State. He ended up getting an East-West Shrine Game invite. Guess who was working there? Me. I got to bring him in. Has Javon Hargrave been pretty good? I think so.
Mm-hmm.
He ended up shining a little bit more when he got out of the public. The only thing it said on the Blesto list was Javon Hargrave reject bubble butt. Bubble butt. That was what it said on the Blesto list.
Wow.
So it said because his frame didn't look right, not that he couldn't play, his frame didn't look right. We're not going to give him an opportunity.
Wow. Sounds like some of that stuff we learned in business school when we were doing those human resources classes. It seems like you just find reasons to eliminate people instead of to include people.
That's it.
But staying with the quarterback discussion quickly. Uh, you've got quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson and Lamar Jackson. The NFL is going more towards the read option quarterback, where we see those every day in HBCU football for the most part, because very rarely do you see a drop back passer in HBCU football. Do you think that may lead to more opportunities for some HBCU quarterbacks to maybe not get drafted, but at least get a realistic shot at a free agent tryout, because the NFL is starting to migrate more towards that system?
Yeah, I think so. I think within the coming years you're going to start seeing more guys getting an opportunity, and the reason is not just that. The NFL is a trendy game. If somebody's doing something, it's a copycat league. Like Lamar Jackson's working, so you're going to see quarterbacks that are going to be like that. Kyler Murray was small, so the teams weren't afraid. Baker Mayfield was small, so now a team's not afraid to take a small quarterback. Do you see how the trend's starting to trend that way? And it's not only small; they're okay with a small quarterback going early. They're okay with a running quarterback going, because this is working now. So now it falls back on the coaching. Can the coaching do something with it? And obviously they all work together, but you're going to start seeing quarterbacks out of the HBCU that do fit that mold. I mean, you look at there's some quarterbacks in this year's draft that are smaller guys like Kevius Williams. He's a smaller guy, but he can run that option well. He can do these type of things. The problem is, are they going to be able to look past his height and his school and his level of competition and everything to give him an opportunity? You look at Jalen Morton. He's more of a passer in this year's draft. He's more of a passer. Is he going to get an opportunity? He had a couple All-Star game opportunities. He did well at them. It's different things. I mean, you have quarterbacks that will get an opportunity, but once they get there, they are going to have a deck stacked against them. They're going to have to shine and prove that they belong there. And then if they can do that through preseason and whatnot, making the 53 or even making a practice squad, then the opportunities are going to blossom for the next person behind them. It's going to take one person to lay that foundation out of the HBCU for the others to start following. And that's what it's going to take. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen pretty soon. There's some quarterbacks coming up that are pretty solid that are going to get an opportunity. And then it'll just fall from there, I think.
Now, with this COVID-19 stuff going on right now, obviously the pro days didn't happen. The pre-draft camps haven't happened. We're probably not going to have many camps once people do get drafted or try to get free agent quarterbacks. How is that going to limit some of the lesser players that usually get those opportunities? They may not be any preseason games. They're already going to eliminate one preseason game in the new NFL contract, going from 4 down to 3. So what about those opportunities to get those reps to get in front of the coaches? What do you think is going to happen with that?
It's more limit. It's going to be more limited type of play, and that's what it comes down to. The pro days is killing prospects. You want to know why? Because a lot of the scouts didn't go in and look at them, and that's a knock. But also, let me give you an example. If you're a coach, you said that you coached Fessel, right? And let's just say, for example, if you're a coach and you got a kid that you know is talented on your football team, do you pick up the phone and make a call for him?
You should.
You should, yeah.
Absolutely. You pick up the phone and you say, listen, man, I have a player. You at least need to look at him. When you're dealing with these small schools, that's what their coaches need to do. But they have to be realistic when doing it. Mm-hmm. Can this guy play at the next level? I don't know, but he's a hard worker. He comes in and grinds. He does this, he does this. They need to get on the phone and start calling these teams. They have the scouts' numbers. The scouts come in and sign their little book, so they know who the scouts are of that area. So get on the phone and call them scouts and say, listen, man, I got a player this year. Being proactive will help. But let me tell you, these pro days are killing them. But any coach can get on the phone and say, hey, look, the pro days are canceled. Is there anything that you want to see on a certain prospect of ours? That's being proactive. Now that scout can say, you know what, hey, can you get him filmed of doing positional drills while he's still at school? And now he does some positional drills. We record it and we send it up. We have it. Almost all these schools have a recording device where they can record a video of somebody and send it off. They have all the technology to do it. These colleges. How many colleges do you think went out of their way and did that? Probably none, because it's not about the player. It's about the pockets. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, kind of sounds like the same thing I do when, as a high school coach, when I try to get my high school athletes into college.
Absolutely. You're on the phone calling these colleges, telling them, "Look, man, I got a prospect down here. I've got two. Man, I've got a D tackle in a corner. I got this and that." And you're on the phone. You're basically, when you took the job, you took the job of a high school coach dash recruiter dash father dash coach dash, you know what I'm saying? You took that role to be a leader for that person. And do you know how many kids that I interview and I go back to them and we talk about them? Who was the biggest influence? They say my high school football coach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A lot. That's a big role, because without you making them phone calls, does he get an opportunity? Anybody can shine if given an opportunity. And anybody can fail if given an opportunity. But you have to have an opportunity to do one or the other. And if you don't have it, what do you do? It's little things, man, that could change the aspect of this entire thing. And don't get me wrong, pro days, they're going to hurt. But if you watch the film, you know he can play or if he can't play. If you watch the film against Elkhorn and you look at them wide receivers, or Darius Anderson and C.J. Blair, and you turn on the film and you go, these guys can't play, you didn't watch film. Because both of those kids are legit. You turn on Morgan State and you see that Manasa Bailey kid burning past people. He's probably a 4.240 kid, and he's smoking people. You got Chris Rowland. I don't care if he's 5'7" at Tennessee State. He's cutting up teams for 12 receptions, 186 yards every game. You don't have to watch film. You can look at a stat box if you're that lazy, and you can tell he can play. And then once you look at the stat box, at least turn on the film. Yeah. It's crazy. But these coaches should be pounding the table for these guys. There's a lot of talented football players in the HBCU this year that are going to come out, and maybe they won't hear their name. The thing you said with COVID-19, you know what's going to happen? You're going to see less small schoolers drafted. You want to know why you're going to see less small schoolers drafted? Because they're going to go off of what they know, and they're going to take the local big school kids near the end of the rounds, probably before they'll take a small school kid, and then they'll just try to sign the HBCU kids at the end. I think that's what's going to happen. I think if you're in Florida and you let's say you're the Miami Dolphins, you're going to start taking the kids from Miami, Fort Lauderdale, from Florida Atlantic, FIU, guys that you've really thoroughly done work on. You're going to start taking more of them locally, and then when it comes time for the HBCU guys and everything else, then you'll just try to give them a little bit of money to bring them in as a free agent. That's I'm hoping that's not what happens, but I have a feeling that's what's going to happen.
Talking about opportunities and continuing on that track, what was missed or what we thought was going to be a tremendous opportunity with the HBCU Combine that the NFL had created, and as well as the regional scouting, which I'm really not sure what that was, that component. I don't know if that was also for FCS players in addition to HBCU players, but just that whole weekend that was supposed to take place in Miami. Is that the biggest, that the fact that you're not going to be able to get in front of the, all 32 teams, and opportunities for guys like DeAndre Francois, Jalen Martin, Ryan Stanley, and in terms of quarterbacks, is that the biggest thing that those guys are missing out on, and just all of those guys in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an opportunity to be timed by NFL scouts. It's an opportunity to be evaluated and filmed, because what they were going to do is they were going to hold a HBCU Combine. They were going to film it. That film would have been accessible to all 32 teams, just like their regional combines that they used to do. All that information gets put in the system. So it's basically, we're taking the best HBCU football players. We're bringing them down here. We're going to work them out. We're going to give them their own combine. We're going to do everything for them. And then we're going to lay it out. and we're going to send it to all 32 teams, and they're going to get to see film of these kids. They're going to get to see everything on these kids. That alone was what they wanted to do with HBCU. Then what they were going to do is they were going to invite international players. These were players from other countries that, because the NFL has expanded to the international thing, and they didn't really have nothing for them. So how are they seen? You know, and I'll give you an example. I talked with a kid from Australia, and he was here in Florida, and he didn't have nobody, and I had to call Ryan Stanley to go throw him some footballs, you know, because he was here running wide receiver drills, and nobody could help him. And this kid was like 6'5", 255 pounds, and he ran a 4.6 40. I mean, that's a pretty talented kid from overseas. So it's the little things, dumb little things they're missing out on. They're missing out on that opportunity, and I think that's going to hurt them, because a lot of them will probably. A lot of scouts will probably lose their job at the end of the year because they didn't do their true job. And you're going to have kids getting drafted, and they're going to go, how come he was a reject on your paper? Because you didn't watch him. You were going off of some draft website or whatever. I think you're going to see a lot of change in that aspect. Maybe they'll give them a pass this year, but I bet you they'll crank it up in higher gear next year. I think you'll start seeing more HBCU players getting an opportunity because of COVID. It's going to end up being a blessing. You got to trust me on this, but in the long run, that workout killed them. It crushed a lot of kids, man, because they're not going to be able to get filmed, number one, and they're not going to be able to really hold a true pro day. It's crazy that you mentioned that too. You know, in 2006, I came up with this idea for the HBCU combine, and I sent it to the NFL, and I sent it to Troy Vincent, and I sent it to everybody, and then I didn't get nothing back. And then 2016, I resent it to the NFL, and Troy Vincent responded back to me. What's that?
You said 10 years later. So you in 06, you sent it to him, and then what? 10 years later, you came back.
10 years later, I sent it back, and I actually got a response back from Kevin Booth and from Troy Vincent in the NFL, and they were like, "Hey, that's a good idea. Let's get on the phone." I got on the phone with them, and never went anywhere. And then that was it. And then, you know, 2020, they could pop up. Guess what we're going to do? It was my exact same plan. And I mean, I still have the plan and everything. I wanted to do an entire week for HBCU, to where the entire week was not just, it was for everything. It was for the culture of HBCU. And they took a little bit from it, but they you know, the combine is huge for them anyway. For anybody, any prospect, a combine in front of all 32 teams, are you kidding me? Most pro days have 3 or 4 scouts at them. Yeah. And now you're going to be an opportunity that you're going to be in the database for the NFL for every team. That's monstrous. So that was a big step forward. But what I want to do is hold an HBCU All-Star game, the best of the best, paid for, have the best band played, voted on by the people, to run a game to where the best bands, they bring their band in, to where you have HBCU alumni that are supporting it, that are putting up money for it, they're helping it fund it, to give these kids a great opportunity, give them a platform, to put it on a TV show like BET, to get it out there in front of everybody. That's what I'm talking about. That's where I was taking the HBCU game, having a whole week with all the Hall of Famers from the Black College Hall of Fame that are coming through, and they can walk through the city. They introduce them just like they do in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and you switch it from city to city for all these major colleges. That, to me, is representing the HBCU. That's what it should be. It should be guest speakers and people getting up there and doing their speeches in front of the fans, in front of the people that watched them play when they were little kids and growing up. Make it an experience. Turn the HBCU into what it was and what it has been, and stop worrying about how much money you're making, and start worrying about what the culture is, because that culture is phenomenal. And if you're going to focus on only the culture by keeping them in the MEAC playing the SWAC and that's it and no playoffs, and you're going to do all this, then you better build the culture, because you're taking away from that kid by not giving him an opportunity to be in that playoff, not to be in that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Them things hurt. And I think that, man, I keep going back to it, man. I hope you guys don't think I'm just some crazy guy just ranting, but you gotta have passion.
Actually,
passion.
Actually, a lot of the side conversations that myself, Brian, our producer Roy, and a few other of our close circle here at Sports Rap, we have these similar conversations offline, just as passionate, especially as just about everybody with our network is if they're not an HBCU grad, they're HBCU affiliated. So when you start throwing in, hey, my school this and my school that, with that passion, oh, we feel you. We're 100% on the same page with you. So definitely. Now, my next question is, we got to kind of go back to the recent past so we can talk about the future. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a Arena Football League fold. We've seen the Alliance of American Football try FL. We've seen the XFL come and recently file bankruptcy. So, as I say, we've got to look at those past to plan for our future. Those minor league opportunities that we thought were going to be there or that used to be there with the AFL are not there anymore. Right now, outside of the NFL, the next most viable option is the CFL. So what other opportunities are there out there for our athletes, especially ones from HBCU? Because we know a lot of times they're going to have to play a minor league before they get another crack at the NFL.
Well, I can tell you, go overseas. It sounds crazy, but it can work. Do you guys remember Ben Anderson came out a couple years ago, quarterback, UAPB, Arkansas Pine Bluff? Quarterback, good kid. I mean, I got a phone call from a school from a team called the Extreme Football League in Japan. Like,
Yep.
what in the heck is this? I got a phone call from some Japanese number, and they said, I seen an article on your website. Can you give me the kid's number? I'm like, okay. So it was new to me. I said, well, so what do you guys want to do? Well, we want to offer him a contract. So I called Ben up, and I said, hey, man, it's going to sound crazy, but a Japanese team's calling me, and they want you. And he's like, for real? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, I'm interested in playing. So I hooked it all up. Ben ended up going over there to like Shanghai or something and winning the championship. He was like Tom Brady in Japan. He was getting paid good money over there. And the opportunities are there. It's just they're not the NFL. If you're willing to go down, let me tell you something. The CFL is no joke, man. Over 25 to 30 players get signed every year at the end of the CFL season to the NFL. The XFL, we're currently at 23 players have signed from the XFL to the NFL. The AAF put in 115 into the NFL after their league was over. These leagues are putting players in. The Arena Football League, very few anymore. Because arena football and the NFL are two different totally monsters. They're just too different. I mean, a lot of kids will go to the IFL, the Arena Football League. That might give them an opportunity to maybe get to the CFL or get overseas. But if you can go overseas and play on a 100-yard field and play outside, even though the level of competition's poor over there, if you can perform, you can make it. And that's what it comes down to. They're going to have to take opportunities. There's opportunities overseas. There's opportunities down south, even like in Brazil has a football team now. Mexico has a football team. So you have kids that are willing to go down there to play. And if you're a top tier athlete, if you're a kid that played at a big school, you'll be a hero in their country because they're just imagine you go to another country, football's not their first sport most of the time. Football's our first sport. These kids have been playing it since they were little. And now they go to this country and they've only been playing football for like 4 years. So the level of competition is going to be insane. Like you can be a superhero over in them countries. And I think that's where you can brand yourself and market yourself well and get an opportunity, but there are less and less opportunities. And that's why it's so hard to make sure these kids get the correct exposure. And that's why I think I pound the table so hard for them, because they do need it. They do. I mean, there's just not a lot of exposure out there for kids. And I mean, it's just not the same anymore. I mean, these leagues, everyone was pumped up for the XFL. I was pumped up for the XFL, and then having it fold that hurts bad. Yeah. But it gives the CFL like, look, man, here we are. We're still going. If you want a constant, guess what? Are you going to send your kid to the next upcoming league, or are you going to send your kid to the CFL if he has an opportunity? You have to send him to the CFL. It's going to be there next year.
Yeah, yeah, it's amazing.
You know?
One of our good friends is a sports agent, Clifford Jackson with Right Touch Sports Management. He was recently talking to us about the overseas opportunities that he puts his clients into, that he makes his clients aware of, and he was talking about that Extreme League over in Japan and the CFL opportunities and just opportunities all over the country that a lot of guys don't hear about unless your agent or representative is connected in and makes you aware of it. It's kind of interesting talking about the CFL with the sort of the closing of the XFL and all of these players that are out there. That's the one thing I found interesting with the AAF, the XFL going at the same time. It just showed you there are hundreds of viable options, or I should say there are hundreds of players out there with talent to field two different leagues, 8 teams in each league? So we're talking 16 teams almost with 40, 50-man rosters. That's how many guys are coming out of college every year that, play football. And then you have the NFL. There's only 32. There's only 60 some odd players on a roster, including practice squads. So the numbers are there for some of these other leagues, and it's mind-blowing at times. And so the opportunities are there, like you said. It's just connecting one source with the next. Let me ask. Let's move forward. Let's kind of. I wanted to ask you about some individual players and some guys. I appreciate you taking time to talk with us, Damond. Some names that kind of interest me and AD as we go through this. You may have some different names as well. I want to talk about or ask you about a guy, Tobias Taylor, running back out of Virginia Union. He left Virginia Union after his junior year, which very rare do you see an HBCU guy leave with a year of eligibility left. But from the moment I saw him his sophomore season, he had a frame that looked like an NFL frame, 6'2", 240, 250, just a truck. What's his chances? What do you think his chances are to get an opportunity to be drafted, or let alone get picked up on a free agent basis?
I don't know who gave him advice, but I mean, I look at him as a football player, and he's decent. There's nothing that's like a wow factor that I just go, holy cow, this kid's extremely talented. He is good. He's a good football player, and at that school, VU, I mean, he was a great football player. He wasn't a wowing like the best in the league. He wasn't none of that. I think he'll get an opportunity as a camp invite. I don't think he'll be a draft pick. And I don't know a lot of the kids' reasonings why they come out of school early. Maybe it's a family issue, or maybe it's, financial issue. I don't know. But sometimes maybe it's somebody pumping them up and telling them that they're the best. And it's sometimes your own people can hurt you, I don't think it was the best decision. I think he should have went back. Now, if there was for example, he couldn't have, let's just say, for example, he was deemed ineligible to play. Well, he was still a junior. So what he could have did is he could have waited, like just simple advice. He could have waited, found out that he wasn't going to go to the draft, filed for the supplemental draft, and now there's only 10 prospects that he's competing with. And just by him just waiting, instead of him coming out early, he hires an agent still, but he has from the year before the year all the way until September to work out and to get right and to be 100% when these NFL teams come. It's the little things. It's the little advice that people are given that sometimes it doesn't make sense. But as a junior, he could have easily just said, instead of declaring, I'm going to wait, did what he had to do, filed for a supplemental draft, came out as a supplemental draft, filed, say, hey, look, I'm not deemed eligible, or I wasn't eligible, and applied for it. If it was approved, then he would enter the supplemental draft and then go from there. But there is rules that he would have to follow to see if he would be deemed eligible as well. It's not like something you can just plan and do. But I don't, like I said, that's if that was available to him. I don't know. But leaving early, it hurts him. I don't think it's going to benefit him. I think he's a good football player. But running back's a dime a dozen. He might get an opportunity with a team to stick. He might be bouncing around for a little bit, and he might end up going to another league or something. But it hurt me when he left because I like him as a football player. I wish one more year of experience helped, but a huge year would have been big for him.
Is there a let me follow up with that, AD. Is there a running back out of this year's class that you like maybe over some others? I mean, there's a nice little crop of about 6 or 7 guys. Is there a guy in there that you like over some others?
Yeah, I love the water bug in Prairie View A&M. Dewanya Tucker.
Dewanya Tucker, yeah.
I love him. I mean, there's some good players all around, but there's something about that kid, man. I don't care if he's 5'1", it don't, or whatever he is. He's 5'5", but you know he'll get written off because of his height, but he's one of the nicest kids, man. I've talked to him on the phone multiple times. I actually scholarshiped him to go to the HBCU All-Star game in Virginia, and paid for his entrance to get into the game because I believe in him, and I believe that with the right opportunity to get in front of the scouts, he'll get an opportunity. He can be a return man, he can be a running back, but I just love he gets lost on the football field. He gets lost behind people, and he's a stud. I mean, that kid's talented. He can catch the ball at the backfield. He can return. He can run. Somebody will take a flyer on him, and I hope they do because he's a great kid overall, and I think that even though the deck's stacked against him, yeah, I think he'll have a good opportunity to make a team. But there's a lot of kids. There's a lot of kids that are coming out this year that'll have an opportunity. It's just whether or not they'll be drafted. I don't think you're going to see a lot of draft picks this year. If I was to guess, I would say on the lower spectrum. Usually it's 17 to 25 players that are drafted from small schools, and I think you're going to see more 15 to 17 range from this year. And I don't think you're going to see – I would be shocked. I mean, I don't think there will be an HBCU player drafted.
Wow. My question is about a quarterback. And this one has an interesting pedigree. DeAndre Francois, you know, he was 2-year starter at Florida State. Did redshirt one of those 2 years due to injury. Transferred to Hampton because of some, as you say, got into a little trouble down in Tallahassee. Had another year of eligibility, but decided to declare himself for the draft. What say you about Francois?
Oh, good old DeAndre. He's a West Orange kid, man, and I'm from right here in Central Florida myself. So I've known his coach forever. His coach, Colin Drafts, back at West Orange was when I worked in the Arena Football League. He was our quarterback for Orlando Predators, and I was able to talk to Colin about everything and talk to DeAndre. We have an exclusive interview on YouTube with DeAndre. It's the only one on the web. Since his Hampton days that we were able to sit down and talk with him, and you know, he answered some questions. He didn't talk about his past. We stayed away from his past because his past is his past. But what he did as a football player, he's extremely talented. There's not a throw in the NFL. There's not a throw that he cannot make in the NFL. He can make every NFL throw. That's number one. Number two, he has the height, weight, size, ability to do it. He did it at Hampton. He performed. But I think teams are going to be so scared of him because of his background thing that he may get a camp invite or signed as a UDFA type undrafted guy. But I don't see him being a draft pick because of, you know, the way that the league views his past. I don't think he'll benefit from the past, obviously, and even whether it was real or not, I don't know. But you know, anything when it comes to domestic violence or anything to that nature, NFL frowns upon, and I think that's a huge, you know, that can hurt you. And he's a great kid. He's a humble kid. He's quiet. I feel bad for him because I think he deserves a shot. And if I'm Canada, I'm on the first line. I already own his rights if I'm Canada, because I know for a fact he'll come out there and ball, and he'll be, in a couple of years, he'll have an opportunity to play in the NFL. So if I'm Canada and if a Canadian team's listening right now, Draft Diamonds is saying claim his rights because he's going to be a good player. There you go.
What about offensive linemen? It's we've seen some offensive linemen from HBCUs get drafted as high as in the first round. Howard out of Alabama State, if I'm not mistaken, just a couple of years ago. I know this year you scouted Donald Boone of Shawan. I know Marcus Pettiford from North Carolina A&T has been on the minds of a few people. What about offensive linemen, maybe even defensive linemen, the interior guys? Is there an interior guy that might break out that could be that one or two drafted HBCU guy this year?
Oh, you know what? I lied. I said there wouldn't be a draft pick. There will be. Alex Taylor from South Carolina State getting drafted. I forgot all about him. I'm not looking at notes or anything. I'm just going off of the dome, so you got to forgive me. Alex Taylor will get drafted, the 6'8" offensive tackle from South Carolina State. He's athletic. Teams love him. His family pedigrees, former NFL players, his uncle. He's a great kid overall. He tested well. He'll get an opportunity. He's definitely going to get drafted at the probably around the 5th to 7th round. He'll hear his name called. When it comes to other offensive linemen, I like Pettiford. Pettiford was a stud. Played hard. I really like a kid named Kevin Hall. Kevin Hall was an O tackle, but I think he could be a guard at the next level. Obviously Boone from Chown. He was another good interior guy. Overall, though, I think Taylor's probably your best offensive lineman on that end. On the defensive side of the ball, there's some good players overall. But the one player that I really like that's intriguing to me that stuck out on film, just kind of a sleeper guy, I'm not going to go with a D lineman. I'm going to go with a linebacker. His name was Rico Kennedy from Morgan State. I don't know why I like the kid so much, but there's something about him that I really love on his film. He makes sound tackles. He takes great angles. He's stupid talented. And off the field, I mean, what a high character kid. I mean, he has children, married. His coaches would allow him. Now, this is cool. I'll say this. Morgan State, props to them. His coaches would allow him to leave practice early to go pick his children up from school and then come back, but he had to finish practice by himself. That's pretty awesome. And to have that father-daughter moment with his kids, and I give him a lot of credit. I mean, that kid's got a lot on him. And he's gonna end up getting a shot in the NFL. I love him. I love his overall talent, though, and I think that he'll be a guy that shock some people when he gets his opportunity, kind of similar to Darius Leonard, but just not well as known. You know what I mean? People aren't talking about him as much, and I think overall, though, that kid's got talent.
Now, the one spot where a lot of NFL teams have taken some chances on drafting some HBCU players has been on the defensive side of the ball, especially defensive back. Now, you just mentioned a linebacker, Rico Kennedy, but looking at some of the top defensive backs at this draft coming out. John Wilson, cornerback, Savannah State. Joshua Hill, safety, Alabama State. Joseph McWilliams, cornerback, Grambling. Who you think if there's a defensive back who may get that opportunity, which one do you think that may be?
Ooh, the Grambling kid's tough. I like his film. He sticks out. He sticks out quite a bit on film. That secondary was so amazing. That Fields, the kid that got hurt there, was, man, I thought for sure that kid was going to be a draft pick before he got injured. He blew. I don't know if you guys remember that. He hurt his leg really extremely bad, the Danequarian Fields. But that secondary is tough, man. And I think if you go back and you look at the stats, I mean, you got kids from Southern like Danny Johnson that once drafted, they perform once they get in the league. I think the cornerback is an easier transitional position because it relies on your talent, your speed, your physicality, in your confidence. I think your confidence becomes a key factor. Once you know you can do it, you can turn that opportunity. And I think that a lot of kids at that D-back spot, I think once you have that confidence going in, if you can keep that confidence strong, that you'll turn out to be a great corner. I love Drayton Florence. Drayton Florence is a kid that came out of Tuskegee, and he was the same way. Everyone would say he's cocky. He's cocky. No, he's not cocky. He's confident. That's why he lasted in the league for years. Cockiness and confidence is two different things. You need them, though, as a cornerback. And I don't know if the kid at Grambling has that. I don't know if, some of the other kids, what's the Hall, right? That's what you said. Williams.
Yeah, Williams.
I mean, I don't know what his attitude is like, but I can tell you this: as a football player, he'll get a shot. I mean, he's got the talent for sure. He's got the talent. It's just I don't know how many teams are really looking for. I know depth-wise, if you look at another thing you got to keep in mind too when you're looking at these players, a lot of these undrafted guys, remember a team can only sign 90. Some of these teams already got 75, 76 players already on their roster, which means what? That means that they're only signing 15 guys after the draft. So if they have 5 draft picks or 7 draft picks like normal, they're signing 8 free agents. So what they'll probably do is sign 5 free agents and then have the last 3 spots or 4 spots and just have 20 guys come in and work out like in a camp workout. So you'll have an opportunity to go to a camp workout or sign an undrafted free agent deal with another team if you've given one. If not, you might have 3 camp workouts. And that's what a lot of teams are doing. So they're getting more guys in the door to work them out. And I think you're going to see a lot of HBCU guys get that opportunity. They'll get that camp invite, and some of them are going to impress and make a team, and some of them will be looking for another opportunity.
One of the names that now this is you reported from your site NFLDraftDiamonds.com a few weeks ago. Fort Valley State's Demetrius Harris, a defensive lineman, had an outstanding season. He was one of our spotlight defensive players of the year. I think he had if I recall the number of tackles for loss, they were one of the tops in the country. He ended up leaving school and signed a contract with the CFL Rough Riders. I was a bit surprised about that, given the timing. Why is he not in the NFL draft pool? Was it a timing issue? What can you share a little bit more about Demetrius Harris and what you learned from that story?
Well, when I talked to him, it was something that he had been thinking about for some time, and I don't know if it was an eligibility issue per se, but he wanted to try to get money as soon as possible. And with the CFL coming, the CFL offered him a contract. It's kind of hard to turn down. When you're being told, he was probably giving advice like, hey, look, if you go into the draft, you might be an undrafted guy, or you might be a late round pick type of player. But if you go to the CFL, you're still young. You're getting that extra year of ability to play in a professional league. You go out there, you do what you have to do. Next year, the contract's up. You can sign with the NFL team as a free agent. You don't have to wait. You don't have to compete. Once the season's over, you can just go and sign. See, that was some pretty smart advice, to be honest with you, because nobody's really been doing this. So what this could be doing is this could open up a bag. This could open up something to go, hey, look, you know what? I'm rated as a 7th round pick. Let me go ahead and sign with the CFL right now. Start making money instead of sitting in college. He's graduated. You know what I mean? Like, right. Intelligent wise, he's done. So I mean, he's going to sit around or get money. I mean, he made a pretty intelligent choice. And he'll be done with school within the next couple of weeks or whatever it is, and then he's off, and he'll go to CFL, make money for a year, rather than playing, risking an injury. He goes and plays now, gets paid for it, and then comes back, and he's a free agent next year in his draft class, and he can sign before anybody else. That's a rarity. It's kind of a shocker, but when you think about it, it might turn out to be a pretty darn good move.
So he basically found a loophole because the CFL draft is after the NFL draft. So he basically found, I guess, through his agent or representation, they found sort of maybe, I guess, the loophole in a process that opened up for him, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, see, you can sign once you're 3 years removed from high school. You can sign with a league, with any professional league. Once you're 3 years removed from high school, you can sign anywhere. So after 3 years of high school, you could be a sophomore at some school, and you can say, man, dude, I want to go and get money, man. You can leave and go to the CFL and get signed and make money for 2 years while everyone else is in college. You won't get the degree, but you can have 2 years of experience coming on them and then end up going to the NFL from the CFL after a 2-year contract, and you can make $60,000 a year, $70,000 a year to play football and get paid and only have to work a couple, and you can still do online courses.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Almost like an internship.
Internship with a professional league, but your film at the CFL level is 10 times higher than your film at the Fort Valley State. If he goes to the CFL and he ends up putting up stats like he did at Fort Valley State, teams are going to be throwing him $150,000, $250,000 signing bonuses in the NFL.
Yeah, it's
so he's betting on himself. He's gambling on himself, and I like it.
Yeah, he's it's interesting at a time when you see another sport like basketball sort of embracing or setting up opportunities for kids to develop before they enter their league. Here's a young man who's taken a chance and found an opportunity to sort of develop and put good, professional film on tape and play at a higher level than where he's at, and it may just turn out to benefit him in the long run. Damon, I appreciate your time. We don't want to take too much of it. I mean, it's a fascinating conversation that we had. I know we could chop it up all day. I can hear your passion about just helping college football players, FCS players, HBCU players, and it's definitely there. I want to encourage everybody to go to NFLDraftDiamonds.com. But before we go, I know you recently put out a story for the 2021 prospective NFL HBCU draft prospects. And number one on the list, I believe, is a guy that I'm really high on, really excited about his prospects. And that's a guy from Alabama A&M, Akil Glass, the quarterback there. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on Glass and just that early perspective of 2021 players.
He's my favorite. I'm with you. I like him a lot. I love the way he plays the game. He sits in the pocket, distributes the ball well. There's a lot of talent on that team around him. He's got some solid younger wide receivers that looked great last year. Another year to develop with them. I think he's going to I think he'll have a huge year this year. Overall, is a prospect. His height, weight, he checks all the boxes. He checks all the boxes for everything. He should receive an invite to an All-Star game, and he'll have an opportunity to play against higher level of competition. So they can't say that. And I think he'll have a good shot. I don't know if he'll be drafted or not. I guess we'll see how the year plays out. With a horrible year, anything can happen. But with a great year, anything can happen as well. But overall, I like him. I like him as a prospect. I think he fits the mold for what I like in a quarterback. I like a big quarterback with a strong arm and not the ability to run if he has to, but thinks about passing the ball before he does running. And he fits that mold. And I'm a fan. I'm a fan of him. I think it'll be interesting to see what NFL teams think of him. And especially, this year, I think he'll have a big year. There's a kid from Texas Southern, Donnie Corley, the wide receiver.
Yeah.
He's a Michigan State kid. He has the background issue, but my Lord, that kid's talented, man. When it comes down to film, man, he's got it. You can't say that it was A, B, or C. I mean, that kid is a stud on the football field. He's been a stud. He played well. Another kid that I really like is Jermaine Martin, the kid from North Carolina, A&T.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of him. I like the way he plays. He's a former Coastal Carolina kid and came to North Carolina A&T, and he's destined to have a monstrous year. I think I'm gonna call. He's gonna go for 2,000 this year.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, I'm calling it. I'm calling 2K.
Okay.
Hopefully he hears it, because I think he can reach it, and if he does, I think he'll solidify himself a heck of a spot in the draft. But I think he has the talent to definitely blow up to that level. And there's a lot of great prospects, man. I love this game. I love UC. I'm already putting out lists of 400 people for next year. I'm already reviewing 2021 film. I love the game. I love it. It's a passion of mine. But at the end of the day, man, HBCU is my heart, man. I fell in love with HBCU football. I fell in love with the atmosphere. There's nothing like going to an HBCU football game. There's absolutely nothing. If you've never done it, you need to put it on your bucket list, because you got to do it. There's nothing like watching them get a flag because the team danced too long, and there's nothing like it, man. If you're a true football fan, it'll hurt a little bit, because you're going to wonder why they're taking the penalty. But listen to me, man. It's the atmosphere is amazing, and the people embrace their teams. Like you said, it's like it becomes a pride thing. They really wear their gear, man. Tuskegee fan, you got the people out there with their hats and their shirts on, and I didn't even know they sold Tuskegee shirts, and they're out here with like 10 different color ones, and they embrace it, man. The fans embrace it. The players embrace it. I just wish that we could get the administration to embrace it the same way. And
it's slowly getting there. It's slowly getting there. There are some good there's some good soldiers out there working. We just got to get more of them.
And I don't want to put a knock on everybody, but it's been horrendous, man. And there's so much more that we as people can do for the HBCU. And not just the HBCU, it's the entirety of it's just football, period. If these are kids' lives, these kids will eventually they're gonna move on to do something. This is their profession. This is what they're really striving for. How can you help them meet that goal? That's what you need to find out. And if that's really what your number one goal is, then that needs to remain your primary focus. And I can tell you, there's talent there. And with the NFL doing the HBCU Combine, they're going to do it again because it didn't work this year. So they're going to end up with it again. It's going to give a lot of coaches. Another thing that I talked to Troy about was they have the HBCU program where the coaches can get on board and they can learn and they can see, like, intern to see what it's like. They need to have a scouting program for the HBCU. They need to have a lot of different things to get these guys going to do it. I'll give you another cool thing. NASCAR reached out to me last year. NASCAR has a program with a lady named Jasmine Neely from NASCAR to where they are looking at HBCU football players and athletes, not just football players, but just athletes, period, that maybe didn't make it in the NFL or didn't have the success maybe in bowling or whatever that they did. NASCAR is looking for people in their pit crew. They do a combine for HBCU athletes to get out there and learn how to do the drilling of the undoing the cars or the tires or whatever you call it, I don't know, pit crew type stuff. But they make six figures. It's an opportunity. That's that's what anybody's looking for. And as a parent, all I'm looking for is my child to have an opportunity. I know I raised my kid to where I hope that they make the best of their opportunity, but if not, I know with the opportunity, I don't think they're going to drop the ball. But I can't just leave the opportunity there with my kid and never to look over their shoulder and never try to help them either. If I give them an opportunity, I need to guide them. And that's what we're supposed to do as parents. That's what we're supposed to do as humans. And I feel like there's a lack in that when it comes to HBCU, and that's why I want to help anybody I can. If I can help a kid out, I'll be more than happy to. We donated, my nonprofit donated $33,000 this year to kids, small school athletes. They can't couldn't get to an all-star game. They couldn't pay for training because training's $10,000 and no agent would sign them. The kids that we believed in, we put the money up. And it's called West Talbot Foundation, and we put the money up to help support these kids. And, you know, I'm all for it. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm doing what I have to do, and I'm hoping that others will join and step up.
Now, if somebody wants to help out with your nonprofit foundation, how do they get in touch with you to do that?
Right now, currently, we're going through the process of solidifying the nonprofit, the 501c3. We're trying to going through all the paperwork and everything with that, but we do have a West Talbot Foundation, a PayPal account that we have set up. We have our Twitter account that's set up where people can go check it out. It's just West Talbot, WEST, and then Talbot. And we're trying to do everything we can to help with just athletes, period, any youth. There's too many kids overlooked, and we got to stop that. We got to time to step up. So I'm gonna do the best I can, and I know you guys are doing the best you can. And I'm not putting down everybody. And I hope you guys know that. There are certain people that could contribute and should contribute, and because it's for these kids, man.
Yeah,
we love success stories. We absolutely love success stories, but sometimes we don't want to help them achieve their success, which is mind-blowing to me.
Damond Talbot, NFLDraftDiamonds.com is the website. If you've been in the dark and you have never been, I encourage you to go. A lot of great information there, a lot of interviews with different HBCU guys, small school guys, FCS, D2, D3, NAIA guys. A must follow on Twitter at Draft Diamonds, DIAMONDS. Any other plugs on social media, Damon?
We're on Instagram and on Facebook.
Okay.
I think at Draft Diamonds on Facebook and NFL Draft Diamonds on Twitter.
All right.
Or on Instagram. I'm sorry.
All right. Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all at Draft Diamonds, and NFLDraftDiamonds.com. I'm hoping we can continue to talk down the road over the course of this period and into the future, because we definitely want to be a part of what you have going on. It's a pleasure. This is the first time we've actually had a chance to talk, so it's a true pleasure. And then I realized I'm in Central Florida too, so we're not that far from each other. So we'll talk off air sometime, and hopefully get a chance to meet face to face. But we appreciate your time and joining us. And we wish you be safe, be healthy. And again, NFLDraftDiamonds.com is the site. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Draft Diamonds. All right. Appreciate your time, Damon. Thank you.
Thank you, guys, and God bless you.
All right. All right.
But you stay hard.